He cried when he inherited only a rocky plot of land, but what he sees between the rocks changes everything. Ethan Mitchell took a deep breath as the lawyer finished reading the will. His hands trembled and his eyes filled with tears when he heard that his share of the inheritance was just an arid plot on the outskirts of Asheville. His two older siblings, Nathan and Chloe, inherited the family home and the thriving general store their father had built over decades of hard work. It was when the lawyer specifically mentioned lot number 42 on Old County Road that Ethan felt his heart tighten. Everyone knew that worthless, rocky area where not even grass grew properly. "Mr. Samuel left a specific letter for you," said Mr. Henderson, handing over a sealed envelope. Ethan took the letter with trembling hands, feeling his siblings' scornful gaze. Nathan shook his head with an air of superiority. "Dad always had a soft spot for you, Ethan." "But it seems in the end he showed what he really thought," whispered Chloe, not hiding the sarcasm in her voice. Ethan's heart ached even more. All his life he had strived to prove his worth to his father, working in the general store since he was a boy, helping with the accounts, taking care of the family. And now this. A plot of land nobody wanted, full of rocks and with no apparent use. He put the letter in his pocket and left the office without looking back. Outside, his wife Abigail waited anxiously. "So?" she asked, trying to read his expression. "A plot of land. Just a plot full of rocks," replied Ethan, his voice choked up. Abigail held his hand tenderly. They had lived in a rented house for 5 years of marriage, dreaming of having something of their own. Ethan's father had always promised he would leave something for all his children, but this seemed more like a humiliation than an inheritance. "Shall we go take a look at this land?" suggested Abigail, trying to cheer up her husband. Ethan agreed with a nod. He needed to understand why his father had chosen to leave that specific piece of arid land to him. Old County Road was 15 minutes from downtown Asheville. When they arrived at Lot 42, Ethan felt his chest tighten again. It was exactly as he remembered, an irregularly shaped plot, covered with rocks of all sizes, without a single decent tree. The midday sun made the place even more desolate. "My God, Ethan, why would your father do this?" Abigail murmured, walking carefully among the rocks. Ethan took the letter from his pocket and opened it slowly. His father's shaky handwriting was there, written just 2 weeks before his passing. "My son Ethan, I know you will be confused by this inheritance, but trust me, this land has something the others cannot see. Be patient and look carefully. You were always the most observant of my children. Don't give up on what seems impossible. With love, your father Samuel." "What could he have meant?" Abigail asked, reading the letter over her husband's shoulder. Ethan shook his head, confused. He walked around the plot, looking for some clue, some sign of what his father was trying to convey. It was just rock after rock, some larger than others, scattered without any apparent pattern. They returned home in silence. That night, Ethan could barely sleep. His father's letter echoed in his mind. Something the others cannot see. What on earth could that mean? The next day, Ethan decided to return to the plot alone. This time he arrived early in the morning, when the sun was still low. He walked slowly among the rocks, observing every detail. That's when a small glint caught his attention. Between two larger rocks, something sparkled when the sun hit it at a certain angle. Ethan crouched down and began to dig with his bare hands. After a few minutes, he managed to extract a small crystallized fragment that reflected the light magnificently. His heart raced. That was definitely not an ordinary stone. The crystal had pinkish tones and impressive transparency. Ethan put the fragment in his pocket and kept searching. Soon he found 3 more similar little pieces. When he got home, he showed the discoveries to Abigail. "Ethan, this is quartz," she exclaimed, examining the crystals. "My grandmother had some similar ones she kept in a special little box." "Do you think it's worth anything?" asked Ethan, hopeful. "I don't know, but it's certainly not just any stone." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. The following week, Ethan spent every morning on the property looking for more crystals. Each day he found larger and more beautiful fragments. Some were completely transparent, others had shades of pink, violet, and even golden yellow. One day, while digging near a larger rock formation, Ethan heard a voice behind him. "Son, you're messing around in the same area your father used to dig." Ethan turned and saw Old Man Arthur, a 70-year-old gentleman who lived on a small neighboring property. The man approached with slow steps, leaning on a wooden cane. "My father came here?" asked Ethan, intrigued. "Yes, he did. Almost every late afternoon for the last 2 years. He'd be over there digging, always in the same little spot. I thought he'd lost something important." Ethan felt his heart race. His father really did know something about that land. "Old Man Arthur, do you know what my father was looking for here?" The elderly man scratched his grey beard and looked at the crystals Ethan had in his hand. "I don't know, son. But he always said those stones had something special. I never really understood. To me, it was all just the same rock." Ethan spent the rest of the day talking with Old Man Arthur. The neighbor told him that Samuel had always been a reserved man, but in recent years had developed a strange obsession with that property. He would spend hours walking among the rocks, jotting things down in a little black notebook. That information left Ethan even more intrigued. If his father had really been studying the land for so long, there was definitely something special there. He intensified his searches, digging in different areas and paying attention to the smallest details. It was on a rainy Thursday that Ethan made his second major discovery. The rain had washed away some of the dirt covering a rock formation in the right corner of the property. When the sun peeked through the clouds, Ethan noticed a different glimmer coming from inside a small, natural cavity. He crouched down and looked closer. Inside were dozens of small crystals, but of impressive quality. They were amethysts of a deep violet color, some the size of his fingernail, others larger than a coin. Ethan carefully removed each crystal, counting 23 stones in total. All were perfect, with no visible cracks or flaws. He had never seen anything like it, not even in the gemstone shops in the historic center of Asheville. When he got home, Abigail was speechless when she saw the discovery. "Ethan, this must be worth a fortune," she said, admiring the crystals under the kitchen light. "You really think so? How can we find out?" "There's an old man at the market square who's been selling precious stones for over 30 years. Everyone says he knows a lot about the subject." The next day, Ethan went to look for the merchant. Old Silas was known in town as a mineral specialist and always had a stall full of colorful stones at the central market. "My word!" exclaimed old Silas upon seeing the amethysts. "Where did you get these beauties?" "They're from my land, old Silas. I inherited it from my father." The shopkeeper took a small magnifying glass and examined each crystal carefully. "Son, this is no joke. These are top-quality amethysts. Look at the color, the clarity, the shine," he said, clearly impressed. "Each of these is worth at least $50, and the bigger ones could go up to $100. Ethan felt his legs go weak. If each crystal was worth $50, he had over $1,000 just from that small find. And this was only the beginning. The land seemed to be full of surprises. "Old Silas, would you buy these stones?" "I would, but my advice is for you to keep them. If you have these on your land, there must be a lot more. It's worth your while to explore it properly before selling anything." Ethan returned home euphoric. For the first time since reading the will, he felt that perhaps his father hadn't abandoned him. Quite the opposite. Maybe he had left him the most valuable gift of all. That night he told Abigail everything. She was as excited as he was, but also worried. "What if your brothers find out?" she asked. "For now, we'll keep it a secret. I need to understand better what's on this land before saying anything." In the following days, Ethan developed a routine. He woke up early, had a quick coffee, and went to the land. He spent the entire morning digging and searching, always finding new crystals. Some days he found only 1 or 2 small ones. Other days he discovered real treasures hidden among the rocks. It was on one of those mornings that Ethan made a discovery that would change everything. While digging near the spot where he had found the first amethysts, his hoe hit something solid that wasn't rock. He dug more carefully and found a small leather pouch buried. Inside the pouch were more crystals, but also something even more important: a letter from his father and a small black notebook full of notes. Ethan opened the letter with trembling hands. Ethan, if you're reading this, it means you followed my advice and didn't give up on the land. This place is special, son. I spent 2 years studying these rock formations and discovered we're sitting on a rare mineral vein. There are amethysts, quartz, and even some more valuable stones buried here. I left this land to you because I know you have the patience and determination to turn it into something great. Your brothers were always impatient, but you always knew that the best things in life require time and dedication. Use this gift wisely. With much love, your father, Samuel. Tears streamed down Ethan's face as he read the letter. His father hadn't abandoned him. Quite the opposite. He had left him an inheritance that could change his life forever. He opened the little notebook and found page after page of detailed notes. His father had mapped the entire land, marking the locations where he had found different types of crystals. There were drawings of the rock formations, notes on the local geology, and even calculations about possible market values. Ethan realized he was holding in his hands the result of 2 years of his father's quiet work. Every note, every drawing, was a clue to finding more hidden treasures. That afternoon, he followed the notebook's instructions exactly and found a small cavity filled with pink quartz of exceptional quality. They were crystals larger than any he had found before, some the size of a walnut. When he got home, Abigail could hardly believe her eyes. "Ethan, this is a fortune. How many crystals have you found already?" They counted together. 143 crystals of various types and sizes, from small fragments to substantial stones that shone magnificently under the light. "Abigail, I think I need to find someone who really understands these stones. Old Silas from the market is a good man, but maybe it's time to talk to a real expert." Ethan remembered that in Atlanta there were stores specializing in precious stones and even a geological society. If the land was really as valuable as his father had indicated in the little notebook, he needed professional guidance. The following week, Ethan and Abigail traveled to the capital. They took a small sample of the best crystals they had found. The first store they visited belonged to a gemologist named Dr. Sterling, who had over 20 years of experience in the precious stone market. "Where did you find these?" was Dr. Sterling's first question after examining the crystals with specialized equipment. "On our land in Asheville," Ethan replied. "Asheville, of course, that makes perfect sense. That region is known for its mineral formations, but these specimens are exceptional. Look here," he said, showing an amethyst under a powerful magnifying glass. "The coloration is perfect, no inclusions, no cracks. This crystal alone is worth at least $300 in the current market." Ethan and Abigail exchanged a look, impressed. "And the others?" asked Abigail. Dr. Sterling examined each crystal individually, making notes on a card. After an hour of analysis, he turned to the couple. "You're sitting on a gold mine, literally speaking. Just these crystals you brought are worth over $5,000, and from what you've described about the land, there's much more where these came from." Ethan felt his heart race. $5,000 was almost 2 years' wages at the general store where he occasionally worked. "Dr. Sterling, would you buy these stones?" "I would, but my advice is for you to fully explore the land before selling anything. If there really is a mineral vein there, you could be talking about tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars." The trip back to Asheville was silent. Ethan and Abigail could barely process the information they had received. The rocky land that seemed like a humiliation was turning out to be an invaluable gift. But when they got home, they found Nathan waiting at the door. "Ethan, where have you been?" "I came by twice this week and didn't find anyone," said Nathan with a suspicious look. "We went to take care of some things in Atlanta," replied Ethan, trying to sound casual. "What kind of things? You don't even have money to travel to the next town, let alone the capital." Ethan realized he needed to be careful. Nathan had always been nosy and suspicious. If he found out about the crystals, he would certainly find a way to try and take part of the inheritance. "Work stuff, Nathan. Chloe's thinking about taking a course there." Nathan didn't seem convinced, but he didn't press the matter. After he left, Ethan and Abigail talked about the need to keep the discoveries an absolute secret. "Ethan, we need to be very careful. If your brothers find out, they'll try to figure out a way to get part of the crystals," said Abigail. "I know. For now, we'll keep exploring quietly. When we're sure of the real value, then we'll decide what to do." In the following days, Ethan intensified his visits to the land. Following his father's notebook entries meticulously, he discovered 2 more cavities full of crystals. One contained exclusively smoky quartz of a translucent brown color and perfect shape. The other was full of citrines, golden yellow crystals that shone like little suns when exposed to the light. Each new discovery confirmed the quiet genius of his father. Samuel had mapped practically the entire land, identifying the exact spots where nature had deposited its most precious treasures. Ethan Mitchell began developing an even more systematic routine. He would arrive at the property before dawn, when it was still cool, and work until midday. He used proper tools he bought at a gardening store, digging carefully so as not to damage the crystals. After 3 weeks of systematic exploration, he had already collected over 400 crystals of various types. He kept everything in a safe he bought especially for this purpose, hidden in his bedroom. It was then that Ethan decided to look for more technical information about the region's geology. At the Asheville Municipal Library, he found some books about the mineral formations of North Carolina. He discovered that the region was indeed rich in quartz and amethyst crystals, but that few private properties had direct access to the appropriate geological formations. The librarian, an older gentleman named Professor Bennett, became interested when Ethan mentioned he was studying local geology. "Young man, did you know there was an official geological survey in this region in the 70s, he said, searching for some old documents. "Official survey?" asked Ethan, intrigued. "Yes, the Regional Geological Society did a complete mapping of the rock formations in this area. They identified several potential mineral veins, but at the time there was no commercial interest in exploring them." Ethan felt his heart race. If there were official surveys confirming the mineral wealth of the region, it gave even more credibility to the discoveries he was making. "Professor Bennett, where can I find these documents? There should be a copy in the municipal archive. I'll ask the secretary to look through the old records." A week later, Ethan had in his hands a copy of the 1976 geological report. The document was technical and hard to understand, but one thing was clear. The property inherited from his father was specifically listed as an area of high potential for occurrence of quartz, amethyst, and other silicate group minerals. That changed everything. Ethan now had scientific confirmation that the property was truly valuable. These weren't just some pretty stones found by chance. It was a geologically rich property, officially recognized. That night, he showed the report to Abigail. "Ethan, this means your father knew from the beginning. He must have researched the property before deciding to leave it to you," she said, impressed. "That's exactly what I'm thinking. Dad didn't do anything by chance. He studied, researched, and chose to leave me the most valuable part of the inheritance." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. However, keeping the secret was becoming increasingly difficult. Ethan had started missing the sporadic work he did to dedicate himself fully to the property. Abigail made up excuses when his siblings asked about his absence, but suspicions were growing. One afternoon, Ethan was digging in a new area when he heard familiar voices. He quickly hid the tools and the crystals he had found that day, but didn't have time to completely disguise his activity. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" shouted Chloe, appearing among the rocks accompanied by Nathan. "Nothing much, just checking out the property, trying to think of what to do with it," replied Ethan, trying to sound natural. Nathan observed the turned earth and the obvious signs of digging. "This isn't checking it out, you're digging here." "What for?" Ethan realized he could no longer completely hide the truth, but decided to reveal only a part. "I found some interesting rocks. Nothing major, just some small quartz pieces. I thought maybe I could sell it and at least get back the money for the land documentation." Chloe bent down and examined the turned soil. "What kind of stones?" she asked, suspicious. Ethan showed a common small quartz he kept in his pocket for situations just like that. "This should be worth about $5–10 each." Nathan took the stone and examined it with little interest. "Ethan, you're wasting your time with this. Just sell this land and buy something worthwhile. There must be someone interested in using this for pasture or planting something. Chloe agreed with a nod. That's true. Stop wasting time digging like a madman and be practical. Land by the roadside always finds a buyer. Ethan listened to his siblings' advice with apparent attention, but inside he felt a mix of relief and irritation. Relief because they didn't suspect the real value of the discoveries, and irritation because they kept treating him as if he were incapable of making the right decisions. "I'll think about what you said," he said, putting the common quartz back in his pocket. After his siblings left, Ethan stood still among the stones, reflecting on the situation. It was obvious that Nathan and Chloe were starting to suspect something was happening. If they discovered the truth about the crystals, they would certainly try to contest the inheritance or demand a share. That night, Ethan talked at length with Abigail about the next steps. They had two options: continue exploring in secret, risking being discovered, or speed up the process and seek professional guidance on how to properly develop the land. "Abigail, I think the time has come to look for specialized help. I'm afraid my siblings will find out and cause trouble." "But Ethan, what if the specialist isn't trustworthy? What if he wants to take advantage of our inexperience?" It was a real dilemma. They were simple people with no experience in the gemstone market. Any misstep could result in the loss of everything they had discovered. Ethan remembered Dr. Sterling in Atlanta. The gemologist had seemed honest and competent. Perhaps he was the right person to guide them. The following weekend, Ethan and Abigail returned to the capital, carrying a much more significant sample of the crystals they had found. This time, they included specimens of all types: amethysts, rose quartz, citrines, smoky quartz, and some stones they still hadn't been able to identify. Dr. Sterling was visibly impressed when he saw the new collection. "For you got all this from the same land?" he asked, examining the stones with even more sophisticated equipment. "Yes, Doctor. Following some notes my father left," replied Ethan. "This is extraordinary. Look at this amethyst," he said, showing a violet stone the size of a chicken egg. "It's one of the most perfect I've ever seen. Without exaggeration, this piece alone is worth over $1,000. Abigail squeezed Ethan's hand tightly. $1,000 for a single stone was more money than they could save in 6 months. "Dr. Sterling, if we were to sell all this, how much would it be worth?" The gemologist made detailed calculations, weighing and measuring each crystal, classifying them by quality and rarity. The process took over 2 hours. "Considering just these samples, we're talking about roughly $15,000, he finally said. Ethan felt his legs go weak. $15,000 was more money than he had ever seen together in his entire life. "But mind you," Dr. Sterling continued, "if you really have a property rich in these minerals, the value could be much higher. My advice is to look for a geologist to do a full assessment of the land." "A geologist?" asked Abigail. "Yes, someone specialized in rock formations. He could tell you exactly what kind of mineral vein you have there and its real extraction potential." Ethan and Abigail left the store with their heads spinning. $15,000 just for the stones they had already collected, and possibly much more still buried on the property. On the drive back, they discussed Dr. Sterling's suggestion about finding a geologist. It was an important step, but it also meant revealing the discovery to one more person. Every new person who knew the secret increased the risk of the information reaching Ethan's brothers. When they arrived in Asheville, they found an unpleasant surprise. Nathan was talking on the sidewalk with a man Ethan didn't recognize. When they saw them arrive, Nathan waved them over. "Ethan, I want to introduce you to Mr. Frank Harrison. He's interested in buying your land," said Nathan, without any preamble. This Frank Harrison was a middle-aged man, dressed simply but with an air of someone who had money. He greeted Ethan with a firm handshake. "Pleasure, Ethan. Your brother told me you have a lot on the Old County Road and that you're thinking of selling." Ethan shot an angry look at Nathan. He had never mentioned any interest in selling the land. "I didn't say I want to sell," replied Ethan, trying to stay calm. "Ah, but you should consider it," said Frank Harrison with a smile. "That area isn't good for much. Rocky land, no water, far from town. I'm offering $5,000 cash. It's a fair price for a property of that type." Ethan felt his blood boil. $5,000 was less than what the stones he had already collected were worth, according to Dr. Sterling's appraisal. "Thank you for the offer, but I'm not interested in selling," said Ethan firmly. Frank Harrison seemed surprised by the refusal. "Ethan, 5,000 cash is no small thing. With that money, you could buy a better plot in a more valued area." Nathan butted into the conversation. "Ethan, you're being stubborn. It's a good offer for a piece of land that's good for nothing." "The land is mine, Nathan. I decide what to do with it." The tension in the conversation was rising. Chloe pulled Ethan by the arm, suggesting they go inside. "Think about the proposal, Ethan," said Frank Harrison before leaving. "My offer stands for a few more days." After the two had left, Ethan grew thoughtful. It was too much of a coincidence for an interested buyer to appear right now, when Nathan and Chloe were suspecting he'd been messing around on the land. "Abigail, I think my brother is getting suspicious about something. It's too much of a coincidence to bring a buyer out of nowhere. Ethan, do you think he found out about the crystals? I don't know, but I'll have to be even more careful, and I think the time has come to look for that geologist Dr. Sterling suggested." That night, Ethan researched online and found the contact for a geologist in Atlanta named Professor David Sullivan, specialized in the mineral formations of North Carolina. He scheduled a consultation for the following week, but didn't reveal many details over the phone. Meanwhile, he decided to continue exploring the land, but with even more caution. He would arrive before dawn and leave before other people started moving around on the old county road. It was on one of these mornings that Ethan made a discovery that would change everything completely. Following a specific note in his father's notebook, he excavated in an area he hadn't explored yet and found a cavity much larger than all the previous ones. This time it wasn't just loose crystals. It was a natural rock formation like a small cave, with its walls completely encrusted with amethysts and quartz of various kinds. Ethan had never seen anything like it, not even in the photos from the geology books he'd consulted at the library. He entered the natural cavity and was amazed. It was like being inside a cathedral made of crystals. The sunlight coming through the opening created multicolored reflections on the encrusted walls. Ethan took photos with his cell phone, trying to document the discovery. This was definitely not something he could hide for long. The formation was too large and too impressive to be explored without professional help. When he got home, he showed the photos to Abigail. She was speechless. "Ethan, this is a crystal cave," she said, swiping from one photo to another. "This must be worth a fortune." "Abigail, I don't think I can keep this from my brothers any longer. A discovery of this size will draw attention, and I don't have enough knowledge to explore that cavity without damaging something important." They decided to speed up contact with the geologist Professor David Sullivan. Ethan called that same day, explaining that he had found a significant mineral formation on his property and needed urgent guidance. The professor was interested and scheduled a visit for the following weekend. Ethan used the days leading up to the visit to conduct a more careful exploration of the natural cavity, taking detailed photos and making approximate measurements. The formation was about 3 meters long by 2 meters wide, with enough height for a person to stand. The walls were covered with crystals of various sizes, from small fragments to substantial formations that seemed to have grown there over thousands of years. Ethan also found evidence that the cavity extended even further into the rock formation. There was a narrow passage he didn't dare explore alone, but it clearly led to even larger areas. When Professor David Sullivan arrived on Saturday morning, Ethan took him straight to the land. The geologist was a man in his 50s, with a graying beard and eyes that showed decades of experience with rock formations. "Ethan, where exactly did you find the crystals you mentioned on the phone?" asked the professor, looking over the land with a technical eye. Ethan guided him to the natural cavity. When the professor saw the formation, his expression changed completely. "My word!" he exclaimed, pulling a powerful flashlight from his backpack. "Ethan, do you have any idea what you've discovered here?" "I know it's some kind of crystal formation, Professor, but I don't understand much about it." Professor David entered the cavity and began examining every detail with specialized equipment. He took photos, made measurements, and collected some small samples for analysis. "Ethan, this is a natural geode of exceptional proportions. Formations like this take millions of years to develop, And the quality of the crystals is impressive, he said, clearly excited. Professor, does this have commercial value? It has scientific, educational, and yes, commercial value. But more than that, you have a rare geological heritage here. This should be properly preserved and studied. Ethan was confused. Geological heritage sounded like something that could complicate his life rather than improve it. Professor, what exactly does that mean? It means you have several options. You could explore commercially, selling individual crystals. You could turn it into a tourist and educational attraction. Or you could seek partnerships with universities and museums. Each option has advantages and disadvantages. Professor David spent the rest of the morning exploring other areas of the land, following the notes in Samuel's little notebook. He found evidence that the geological formation extended across practically the entire property. Ethan, your father was a very intelligent man. These notes show he perfectly understood the potential of this property. You're standing on one of the richest quartz formations I've ever seen on private property. That afternoon, Professor David Sullivan gave a detailed presentation to Ethan and Abigail Mitchell, explaining the available options and the necessary care to develop the property properly. The first thing you need to understand is that this here is an inheritance for several generations. It's not something to be exploited quickly and discarded. With proper management, it can generate income for decades. Ethan listened attentively to all the explanations. The professor suggested three main paths: commercial exploration through partnerships with specialized companies, development of educational geological tourism, or a combination of both. Professor, what would your recommendation be? Asked Abigail. Considering you have no experience in the field and that the formation has significant scientific value, I would recommend starting with educational tourism. It's more sustainable in the long term and preserves the natural formation. Ethan liked the idea. Educational tourism sounded like something they could develop gradually, without large initial investments and without destroying the discovery his father had left him. But as they were heading home, they found Nathan and Chloe waiting at the door, accompanied once again by Frank Harrison. The expression on the three of them was not friendly. "Ethan, we need to talk," said Nathan in a serious tone. Ethan realized the situation had become complicated. It was obvious they suspected something and weren't going to give up easily. "Talk about what, Nathan?" "About what you've been doing on that land, and about why you refused such a good offer from Mr. Harrison." Frank Harrison approached with a forced smile. "Ethan, I'll be direct with you. I know you found some little stones on your land, but even so, my offer still stands. $5,000 cash, no complications." Ethan felt they knew more than they were letting on. Someone had said something or discovered information about his activities on the land. "Frank, I already said I'm not interested in selling," Chloe interjected into the conversation. "Ethan, don't be stubborn. $5,000 is a lot of money for you two. With that, you could buy a small house or start a business." Ethan realized his siblings were pressuring because they believed he had found something valuable, but they probably didn't imagine the true extent of the discovery. "The land is mine by inheritance. I decide what to do with it," repeated Ethan, maintaining his firmness. Frank Harrison slightly changed his tone of voice. "Ethan, I'll increase my offer. $7,000. Final offer." $7,000 confirmed Ethan's suspicions. Frank Harrison knew there was something valuable on the land. No one increased an offer by 40% for a rocky piece of land without a reason. "No. Thank you, but no." Nathan became visibly irritated. "Ethan, you're being an idiot. $7,000 is a fortune for you. Nathan, please. My decision is already made." After the three of them left, Ethan told Abigail about the conversation with Professor David Sullivan and about his suspicions regarding Frank Harrison's insistent offers. "Abigail, they know there's something valuable on the land. I don't know how they found out, but they know. And now they're going to increase the pressure. Ethan, what if they try to take the land through the courts? Your siblings could make up any excuse." It was a real concern. If Nathan and Chloe discovered the true value of the inheritance, they would certainly try to contest the will or claim that their father wasn't in a proper condition to decide. That night, Ethan made an important decision. It was time to seek legal protection for his inheritance. On Monday morning, he looked for a lawyer in Asheville to discuss the situation. Attorney Miller was an experienced lawyer who served many families in the region. Ethan explained the situation: the inheritance, the discoveries on the land, the persistent purchase offers, and the pressure from his siblings. "Ethan, you did the right thing coming to me. Let's get ahead of any questions about the inheritance," said the attorney. "First, I'll request a complete copy of the probate proceedings. Second, we'll properly document your discoveries on the property." Attorney Miller explained that it was important to have professional documentation about the property's value to protect against potential legal challenges. "Do you have the report from that geologist who visited the land?" he asked. "No, sir, he only made an initial visit, but he can prepare a technical report if necessary." "That's exactly what we'll do. An official geological report will protect you from any claim that the inheritance was unbalanced or unfair." Ethan left the attorney's office with a list of tasks to complete. The main one was to request a comprehensive geological report from Professor David Sullivan, officially documenting the property's value and potential. When he got home, he found Abigail visibly upset. "Ethan, something strange happened. Old Man Arthur stopped by and said that last night he saw a strange car parked on Old County Road, very close to your land." Ethan felt a chill in his stomach. Someone was watching the property. Could he see who it was? No, it was dark, but he said the car stayed there for over an hour, with its headlights off. Ethan decided to double his precautions. It was obvious that Frank Harrison, or someone connected to him, was investigating the land on his own. That afternoon, Ethan visited Old Man Arthur to hear more details about the suspicious car. The elderly neighbor was working in his small garden when Ethan arrived. Ethan, good that you showed up. I was going to stop by your house today," said Old Man Arthur, wiping his hands on his shirt. "Old Man Arthur, my wife said you saw a strange car yesterday." "I sure did, son. A dark car, looked expensive. It sat there for over an hour, then left slowly in no hurry." Ethan grew worried. It was clear someone was investigating his activities on the land. "Old Man Arthur, if you see that car again, can you let me know?" "Of course, Ethan, but listen, let me tell you something. Your father, in his last few months, was also worried about strange folks hanging around here." Ethan stopped what he was doing and paid full attention. "What do you mean, Old Man Arthur?" "Your Samuel told me that some people showed up interested in buying his land, but he got suspicious because they offered a lot of money for land everyone thought was worthless." Ethan felt his heart race. His father had already faced the same situation he was living through now. "Do you remember anything else?" "I remember your father got very sharp after that. He said he was going to leave the land to whoever knew how to appreciate what was found there. Now I understand what he meant. Ethan returned home with more information than he expected. His father not only knew the land's value, but had also been pressured by people wanting to buy it. The decision to leave the inheritance specifically to Ethan made even more sense now. That night, Ethan called Professor David Sullivan to request an official geological report on the property. He explained the pressures he was facing and the need for technical documentation to protect his rights. "Ethan, I'll make a point of preparing a full report. Your discovery is too important to be lost because of outside pressure," said the professor. In the following days, Ethan kept a discreet watch over the land. He would arrive at different times, using alternate routes, always alert for possible observers. He didn't find anyone, but had a constant feeling of being watched. It was on a Thursday that the situation exploded. Ethan was exploring a new area when he heard voices approaching. He quickly hid the tools and the crystals he had found that day, but didn't have time to completely disguise his activity. Frank Harrison appeared accompanied by two men Ethan didn't know. They walked straight toward where he was. "Good morning, Ethan," said Frank Harrison with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What a coincidence to find you here." Ethan realized it was no coincidence at all. They knew exactly where to find him. "Good morning," replied Ethan, trying to stay calm. One of the men with Frank Harrison approached the area where Ethan had been digging. It was obvious they were people with experience in mining or geology. "Ethan, these are my associates Vince and Greg. They understand mineral exploration," said Frank Harrison. Ethan felt the situation was getting dangerous. Three men in an isolated location, clearly interested in his property. "You are on my property without permission," said Ethan, trying to sound firm. Frank Harrison laughed. "Ethan, relax. We're all friends here. We just want to do business." Vince crouched down and examined the disturbed soil, then picked up some quartz fragments Ethan hadn't managed to hide. "Frank, you were right. There's good quality crystal here," he said, showing the stones to his companions. Ethan felt his blood boil. They were on his property, messing with his discoveries, without any permission. "Get off my property, now." Frank Harrison completely changed his tone of voice. "Ethan, let's be practical. You don't have the knowledge or the resources to properly explore this. We do. Let's form a partnership." "I'm not interested," Ethan replied firmly. Greg, who had been silent until then, spoke up. "Ethan, you don't understand the situation. Mineral exploration is serious business. There are permits, technical knowledge, investment. You have none of that." Ethan realized they were trying to intimidate him. It was time to leave and get help. "I already said I'm not interested, and you are trespassing on my property." He started walking toward the road, but Frank Harrison followed him. "Ethan, think about it. We can offer a 50-50 partnership. You bring the land, we bring the knowledge and the investment." Ethan didn't answer and kept walking. He knew any deal with those people would be bad for him. "Think about the offer, Ethan," shouted Frank Harrison when Ethan was already far away. "Don't let the opportunity pass." Ethan arrived home nervous and told Chloe everything. The situation had gotten out of control. Now there were people who knew exactly the potential of the land and were willing to pressure him to get it. "Ethan, we need the protection of the law. They might try anything to take the land," said Chloe, clearly worried. Ethan agreed. It was time to speed up all the legal and technical processes. He immediately called Attorney Miller and told him about the encounter on the property. "Ethan, that's trespassing. We'll file a police report and request police protection for your property," said the attorney. "And I'll speed up the inheritance documentation process." The next day, Ethan went to the police station accompanied by his lawyer. The sheriff, Sheriff Thompson, listened to the report carefully. "Ethan, trespassing is a crime. I'll have a patrol car make regular rounds in the area, and if those men show up again, call immediately." Ethan left the police station feeling more protected, but knew the problem was far from solved. Frank Harrison and his partners wouldn't give up easily. That afternoon, Professor David Sullivan arrived to conduct the official geological survey. He brought more sophisticated equipment and an assistant to help with the documentation. "Ethan, we're going to do a thorough job. Photographs, measurements, chemical analyses, everything officially documented," said the professor. The work took 2 full days. The professor and his assistant mapped the entire rock formation, catalogued the different types of crystals found, and made a technical estimate of the exploration potential. At the end of the second day, Professor David presented the preliminary results. "Ethan, I can tell you now that you have one of the richest quartz and amethyst formations I've ever documented on private property. The report will confirm a significant asset value." "Professor, can you give me an idea of how significant? Considering only what's been mapped so far, we're talking about a mineral asset in the ballpark of $100,000. But if the formation continues into the unexplored areas, it could be much more." Ethan was speechless. $100,000 was more money than he ever imagined earning in his entire life. Abigail, who had followed the whole process, squeezed her husband's hand tightly. "Ethan, your father left you a real fortune," she said, emotional. Professor David completed the report the following week and delivered a 15-page technical document with photographs, chemical analyses, and an economic assessment of the property. Ethan took the report to Attorney Miller, who was impressed with the documented value. "Ethan, this completely changes the legal situation. With this report, any challenge to the inheritance becomes very difficult to sustain," said the lawyer. "I'll file a copy with the county clerk and another with the property registry." But on the same day, Ethan officially registered the value of his inheritance. Nathan showed up at his house accompanied by another lawyer. "Ethan, I need to talk to you about Dad's inheritance," said Nathan, with a serious look. Ethan realized his worst fears were coming true. Nathan had found out about the land's value and was coming to question the division of the inheritance. "What kind of talk, Nathan?" The lawyer accompanying Nathan introduced himself. "I'm Mr. Dalton. I represent Nathan Mitchell in a matter concerning your father's will." Ethan felt his stomach turn. It was exactly what he feared. "Mr. Dalton, what is the issue?" "Mr. Ethan, my client believes the division of the inheritance was not equitable. There is evidence that the land you inherited has a value far exceeding what was declared in the probate inventory." Ethan tried to stay calm. "The will was made at the county clerk's office with all legal formalities. My father was of sound mind when he made those decisions." Nathan interrupted the conversation. "Ethan, don't play the saint. Everyone knows you found valuable stones on that land. The inheritance needs to be reviewed." Ethan realized they knew about his discoveries, but probably didn't grasp the true extent of the value found. "Nathan, the land was considered worthless by all of us, including you. Now that I've found something interesting, you want to change the inheritance." Mr. Dalton tried to mediate the discussion. "Gentlemen, let's keep this civil. Mr. Ethan, would it be possible to have access to a current technical assessment of the property?" Ethan knew he couldn't deny the existence of the geological report since it was officially registered. "I do have a technical report, but it was done after the inheritance was already settled." "Exactly," exclaimed Nathan. "That proves the land's true value wasn't considered in the will." Ethan realized the situation was getting complicated. It was possible that Nathan could challenge the inheritance in court, especially if he proved there was information about the mineral value that wasn't considered in the inventory. "Mr. Dalton, what kind of challenge are you planning to make?" "Mr. Ethan, we are considering filing a lawsuit to annul the will due to lack of informed consent. If the testator didn't know the true value of the assets, the division can be considered improper." Ethan became worried. Even knowing his father was perfectly aware of the land's value, it would be hard to prove that legally. That night, Ethan spoke at length with Abigail and Attorney Miller about the legal threat from his siblings. "Ethan, they'll have a hard time proving your father didn't know the land's value, especially considering the notes he left," said the attorney. "But it's better we prepare for a lawsuit." The situation had become a legal battle. On one side, Ethan trying to protect the inheritance his father left him. On the other, Nathan and Chloe questioning the legitimacy of that inheritance. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out, now continuing. In the following days, Ethan decided to look for more evidence that his father knew the land's value. He returned to the family home, which now belonged to Nathan, and asked to review Samuel's personal belongings. "Why do you want to go through Dad's things?" asked Chloe suspiciously. "I'm looking for documents that might help me with the land," Ethan replied honestly. Nathan allowed the visit, but accompanied Ethan throughout the entire search. In their father's room, Ethan found a box of old papers that included bills, receipts, and various correspondence. It was among these papers that Ethan found something crucial: a letter from the Asheville Town Hall, dated 2 years before his father's death, requesting information about authorization for mineral research in the Old County Road region. The letter proved that Samuel was officially notified about the interest in mineral research in the area where his land was located. This demonstrated he knew about the region's geological potential when he decided to leave the property to Ethan. "Ethan, what is that?" asked Nathan, trying to see the document. "A letter from the town hall to Dad," replied Ethan, quickly putting the paper away. When he got home, Ethan showed the letter to Attorney Miller. "Ethan, this is crucial evidence. This official correspondence shows your father was informed about the area's mineral potential. Any claim that he didn't know the land's value becomes very difficult to sustain." Ethan returned to the family home the next day, this time accompanied by the attorney, to conduct a more systematic search. They found more evidence: receipts for geology book purchases, correspondence with the Regional Geological Society, and even a certificate of participation in a course on mineral identification. "Attorney Miller, this proves my father studied the subject for years," said Ethan, examining the documents. "Exactly, Ethan. Your father not only knew the land's potential, but technically prepared himself to understand its value. This completely destroys any claim of ignorance about the inherited asset. Nathan was visibly disturbed, seeing the amount of evidence demonstrating their father's technical knowledge of geology. "This doesn't prove anything," he said, trying to downplay the discoveries. "Dad could have had an interest in the subject without knowing his own land had value." But even Chloe, who initially supported Nathan, began to have doubts when she saw the detailed notes their father had made about the property. "Nathan, maybe Dad really knew what he was doing," she said, examining the little black notebook. "Look at these markings. He knew exactly where the crystals were." Ethan realized Chloe was starting to understand the real situation. Their father hadn't unfairly favored one child over the others. He had made a conscious and informed choice about how to divide the inheritance. That afternoon, Mr. Dalton called Attorney Miller to request a meeting to discuss the situation. The two lawyers met the next day without their clients present. Attorney Miller presented all the evidence that Samuel knew perfectly well the value of the land when he made the will. The official correspondence, the geology books, the course certificate, and most importantly, the detailed notes about the property. Mr. Dalton analyzed each document carefully. At the end of the meeting, he reached an obvious conclusion. "Attorney Miller, considering this evidence, it becomes very difficult to sustain a claim of defective consent. The testator was clearly well informed about the value of the assets." Ethan was relieved when his lawyer told him about the outcome of the meeting. But he knew Nathan wouldn't give up easily, especially now that he had a clearer idea of the value involved. It was then that something unexpected happened. Frank Harrison sought out Nathan directly, offering to finance the lawsuit in exchange for future rights to the land. Ethan discovered this alliance through Old Man Arthur, who witnessed a conversation between Nathan and Frank Harrison on the old county road. "Ethan, they were talking about splitting something after they took the land from you," the elderly neighbor recounted. "That Frank guy talked about paying for the court costs." Ethan was outraged. It wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It was a coordinated attempt by outsiders to take over his inheritance. When Attorney Miller learned of the alliance between Nathan and Frank Harrison, his legal strategy changed completely. "Ethan, now we have a clear case of bad faith. Your brother is being manipulated by outside interests regarding your property. This greatly strengthens our position," said the lawyer. Ethan decided to confront Nathan directly about the alliance with Frank Harrison. He went to the family home and found his brother sorting through some papers. "Nathan, I need to talk to you about Frank Harrison." Nathan became visibly nervous. "What about him?" "I know he's financing your lawsuit against me." "In exchange for what, Nathan?" Nathan tried to deny it, but it was clear he was lying. "Ethan, you're imagining things." "Nathan, are you going to let a stranger take over our father's inheritance? Is that what you want?" Ethan appealed to family feeling, trying to make Nathan understand he was being manipulated. "Frank Harrison has no right to what our father left. If you succeed in voiding my inheritance, who ends up with the land isn't you. It's him." Nathan fell silent for a few moments. Ethan realized his brother was starting to understand the situation. "Nathan, our father left the land to me because he trusted my judgment. If you help me protect his legacy, I promise we'll find a way for you to benefit too." It was the first time Ethan had offered any kind of partnership to his siblings, not out of legal obligation, but as a family choice. Nathan became thoughtful. Chloe, who had overheard the conversation from the kitchen, approached. "Ethan is right, Nathan. If we void the will, the one who profits will be this Frank Harrison, not us." Ethan realized there was a chance to resolve the dispute within the family without outside interference. "Nathan, Chloe, our father left something valuable for our family. Let's protect it together instead of fighting and letting strangers take advantage." In that conversation, Ethan explained to his siblings the entire process of discovering the crystals, Professor David Sullivan's guidance on sustainable development, and his ideas for turning the land into a long-term family project. "The idea isn't to get rich overnight by selling everything. It's to create something that lasts for generations and honors our father's memory," explained Ethan. Chloe became interested in the proposal. "What kind of project, Ethan?" "An educational geological tourism center. People would come to see the natural formation, learn about geology, and even extract small crystals for a fee. It would provide steady income and preserve Dad's discovery. Nathan, who had remained silent during the explanation, finally spoke up. "Ethan, are you serious about including us in this project?" "Yes, I am, Nathan, but as family, not as legal partners bound by a contract, and without interference from people like Frank Harrison." Ethan was making a genuine offer of reconciliation, not because he was legally obligated, but because he believed their father's legacy should unite the family, not divide it. Chloe was the first to accept the proposal. "I like the idea, Ethan, and I think you're right about protecting Dad's legacy." Nathan took a few more days to decide, but finally agreed to break the alliance with Frank Harrison and withdraw the legal challenge to the inheritance. "Ethan, I'm sorry for all the trouble. I was jealous when I found out the land's value, but you're right. What matters is keeping the family together." When Mr. Dalton was informed that Nathan was dropping the lawsuit, he seemed relieved. "Mr. Nathan, I believe you've made the right decision. With the evidence the other side has, it would be very difficult to win in court." Frank Harrison was not at all pleased when he found out Nathan had changed his mind. He showed up at the family home making threats and demanding reimbursement for the money he had invested in the lawsuit. "Nathan, you made a deal with me. You can't back out now," shouted Frank Harrison, visibly angry. Nathan, now supported by his siblings, managed to stand his ground. "Frank, I didn't make any deal that forces me to continue a lawsuit I no longer want. The land belongs to my family and it's going to stay that way." Frank Harrison tried to threaten the family legally, but Attorney Miller made it clear that any attempt at pressure would be considered coercion and reported to the authorities. With the family matter resolved, Ethan could finally dedicate himself to developing the project on the land. Professor David Sullivan helped draft a sustainable geological tourism plan that would preserve the natural formations and generate income through educational visits. The project included creating safe trails, educational signs, a small visitor center, and specific areas where tourists could search for and collect small crystals for a fee. "Ethan, you can host school groups, families, tourists interested in geology. It's a growing market niche," explained Professor Sullivan. Ethan, Abigail, and his siblings worked together to develop the project. Chloe took charge of the administrative part. Nathan handled the physical infrastructure, and Ethan coordinated the technical aspects with guidance from Professor Sullivan. It took 6 months to prepare everything properly. They built a small visitor center using local materials, created a trail system that respected the natural rock formation, and established partnerships with local hotels and tourism agencies. The inauguration of the Samuel Mitchell Crystal Gardens took place on a sunny Saturday morning. Over 100 people attended, including local authorities, teachers, tourists, and area residents. Ethan gave an emotional speech during the ceremony. "This place represents the vision of a simple man who knew how to see beauty and value where others saw only rocks. My father, Samuel Mitchell, left for our family not just a financial inheritance, but a lesson in patience, perseverance, and wisdom." The project was an immediate success. In the first week, they received 12 groups of visitors, including 2 school field trips and a family of tourists from Chicago. The children were delighted to discover small crystals among the stones. The adults were impressed by the natural geological formation and the educational explanations about how the crystals formed over millions of years. Ethan hired 2 local guides, established a visitation booking system, and created different types of experiences: educational visits for schools, family discovery experiences, and technical visits for those interested in geology. Each visitor paid an entry fee and was entitled to take home the small crystals they found in a specific area prepared for that purpose. The larger and more valuable crystals remained protected in their original natural formation. Within 3 months of operation, the Samuel Mitchell Crystal Gardens had become one of the main tourist attractions in Asheville. Ethan had to hire 2 more employees and expand the visitor center to accommodate the growing demand. The monthly income exceeded any initial expectations. It was more money than Ethan earned in a year of work at the general store, and the best part, it was a sustainable income that could last for decades. Abigail became responsible for visitor services and educational activities. She discovered she had a natural talent for explaining geology in a simple and interesting way, especially to children. The project's success attracted regional media attention. Newspapers from Atlanta published articles about the Sustainable Geological Tourism Initiative, and the local television station did a special report on the family that transformed a rocky plot of land into an educational attraction. With the positive publicity, Ethan received invitations to lecture on sustainable development at universities and tourism conferences. The project became a model for how to turn natural resources into income without destroying the environment. 1 year after the inauguration, Ethan decided to create an educational fund with part of the profits. The fund offered geology scholarships to young people from the region who demonstrated interest and aptitude for the earth sciences. Chloe, I want my father's legacy to go beyond our family. He believed in knowledge and education. These scholarships will help other young people discover the same passion for geology that he developed. The first class of scholarship recipients included 5 high school students from Asheville and the surrounding area. They received guidance from Professor David Sullivan and participated in the educational activities of the Crystal Gardens as part of their practical training. Frank Harrison tried a few more times to approach the family offering partnerships, but was always politely refused. Ethan had learned that the true value of his father's inheritance was not just in the crystals, but in the wisdom of developing it in a sustainable and family-oriented way. 2 years after the discovery of the first crystals, Ethan found himself in a completely different situation. From a son rejected and humiliated by an apparently worthless inheritance, he had become the coordinator of a prosperous and sustainable family project. The property that once seemed like a curse had transformed into a blessing that benefited not only his family, but the entire local community. The Crystal Gardens created jobs, attracted tourists to the region, and offered geological education to thousands of people every year. One Sunday afternoon, Ethan was walking through the property when he found a bronze plaque he had never seen before. It was buried at the exact spot where the first excavations had taken place, uncovered by natural erosion from the recent rains. The plaque contained an engraved message that made Ethan understand completely his father's wisdom. To my son Ethan, who always knew how to see beauty where others see only obstacles. This land is proof that patience and dedication can turn any desert into a garden. The true inheritance is not the precious stones, but the lesson that the value of things lies not in their appearance, but in the dedicated work we apply to them. Use this gift to do good and teach others about the patience needed to turn dreams into reality. With all my love and pride, your father, Samuel Mitchell. Ethan called Abigail and his siblings to read the message together. They were all moved to realize the depth of their father's planning and his wisdom in choosing exactly the right person to receive that responsibility. Ethan, Daddy knew you would do the right thing, said Chloe, wiping tears from her eyes. He chose you because he trusted your character, not just your ability to find the crystals. Nathan agreed with a nod. Ethan, I apologize again for doubting Dad's intentions. Now I understand he made the right choice. You turned an inheritance into something much bigger than money. That evening, the family gathered for dinner at the house that now belonged to Nathan, but which remained the family meeting place. It was the first time in years that everyone was truly united, without resentment or disputes. Ethan took the opportunity to announce a new initiative. Abigail is pregnant. Our son will grow up knowing the story of his grandfather, Samuel, and learning about the importance of patience, dedication, and honest work. The pregnancy news brought even more joy to the family. The baby would be born into a prosperous and united family, an heir not only to material possessions, but to solid values and a tradition of hard work. Ethan decided to document the entire story of the land's discovery and development in a book that would be distributed free to visitors of the Samuel Mitchell Crystal Gardens. The book would tell the story of Samuel Mitchell, his quiet geological research, and his wisdom in choosing the right heir for such a great responsibility. Professor David Sullivan offered to write the technical aspects of the book, explaining the region's geological formation and the scientific importance of the discoveries made on the property. Ethan, your family's story should be known by others. It's an example of how to develop natural resources in a sustainable and responsible way," said the professor. The book was launched on the 3rd anniversary of the Crystal Gardens. The launch ceremony was attended by municipal authorities, university professors, and dozens of people who had been inspired by the Mitchell family's story. During the launch, Ethan gave a speech that summed up everything he had learned. 3 years ago, I cried when I inherited only a rocky plot of land. I thought my father had abandoned me, had given me the worst possible gift. Today I understand he gave me the best gift a father can give a son, an opportunity to prove my character, and a lesson on how dedicated work turns any difficult situation into victory. The Crystal Gardens expanded in the following years. Ethan added a geology lab where visitors can observe crystals under a microscope, a library specializing in the geology of North Carolina, and an exchange program with national and international universities. The project that began as a rejected inheritance became a national reference in sustainable geological tourism. Ethan Mitchell was invited to participate in conferences in other countries, sharing the experience of developing mineral resources without destroying the environment. But the most important aspect for Ethan remained familial. The land that almost divided the family became the element that definitively united it. Nathan and Chloe became active partners in the project, each contributing their specific skills. Chloe developed a local handicraft program using small imperfect crystals that were not suitable for collection. The program employed several women from the region in creating jewelry and decorative objects sold in the visitor center's shop. Nathan specialized in the infrastructure and logistics part, ensuring that the project's growth always maintained the quality of services offered to visitors. Abigail became the official educational coordinator of the project, developing specific programs for different age groups and levels of interest in geology. When the son of Ethan and Abigail was born, he was named Sammy Mitchell Jr., in honor of the grandfather who left such a significant legacy for the family. Little Sammy literally grew up among crystals, learning early on about the importance of nature, family work, and the wisdom that comes from patience and dedication. By the age of 5, the boy could already identify different types of quartz and loved showing visitors the treasures his great-grandfather had found on the land. Ethan often took his son for walks around the property on Sunday mornings, telling stories about Grandpa Samuel and explaining how each part of the project had been developed. "Daddy, why did Grandpa Samuel hide the stones?" the boy asked on one of these walks. "Because he knew that the best things in life need to be discovered with patience, my son. He could have shown the crystals to everyone, but he wanted me to learn to value them through my own effort." Ethan realized he was passing on to his son the same values he had learned from his father's inheritance: patience, dedication, respect for nature, and the importance of family work. 10 years after the first crystal discovery, the Samuel Mitchell Crystal Gardens had become one of the main tourist attractions in North Carolina. It received over 10,000 visitors per year and generated direct and indirect jobs for more than 30 people in the region. Ethan had achieved something few entrepreneurs accomplish: creating a prosperous business that simultaneously benefits the family, the local community, and the environment. Universities from other countries sent students to learn about the project as an example of sustainable development. The model created by the Mitchell family inspired similar projects in other regions of the United States and Latin America. But for Ethan, the greatest success remained personal and familial. The inheritance that initially seemed like a rejection revealed itself to be the greatest gift a father could give: an opportunity to discover one's own potential and the importance of family values. During a ceremony commemorating the project's 10th anniversary, Ethan gave a speech that moved everyone present. "My father, Samuel Mitchell, taught me that the value of things is not in their external appearance, but in the work and dedication we apply to them. A rocky piece of land was transformed into a garden because we applied love, patience, and knowledge. Similarly, anyone can transform their difficulties into opportunities if they have the right values and don't give up on their dreams." The Mitchell family's story became legend in the Asheville region. Parents told their children about the man who cried upon inheriting a rocky piece of land, and turned that inheritance into a blessing for the entire community. Ethan Mitchell had learned the greatest lesson a son can learn, that a father's love sometimes reveals itself in ways we only understand years later, and that the greatest inheritances are not material, but values and opportunities for personal growth. The land that nearly destroyed the family became the symbol of its unity. The crystals that seemed like just pretty stones transformed into symbols of patience, dedication, and wisdom. And the final message from Samuel Mitchell, engraved on that bronze plaque found years later, continued to echo in Ethan's life. The true inheritance is not the precious stones, but the lesson that the value of things lies not in their appearance, but in the dedicated work we apply to them. Ethan managed to fully honor his father's memory, turning an individual inheritance into a community legacy, preserving nature and creating opportunities for education and work for hundreds of people. The man who cried upon inheriting a rocky piece of land became an example of how a father's wisdom, combined with a son's dedication, can create miracles that benefit future generations. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story of overcoming and discovery. Do you believe Ethan made the right choices? Leave your opinion in the comments with sincere words. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.